Hey math friends, we are going to work on lesson 1-1 today, which is on identifying and interpreting integers. So a few things that we are going to work on today is identifying what positive and negative numbers mean as integers and when we would use them. We're also going to graph those numbers on a number line, and we're also going to find the opposites of those positive and negative integers. So if you have not already done the Spark Your Learning, I want you to go pause this video and work on the Spark Your Learning first. When you've done the Spark Your Learning, come back and I'd like to share a strategy with you. So if you have done the Spark Your Learning, you know that you were talking about a football team and they recorded when they gained or lost yards on different plays. And so we're going to model how we did that. So I just want to show you how I would do that. The way you did that might look different, and that's okay. We can all use different strategies to solve the same math problem. So first, I need to think about what does it mean when I gain something. So I know when I gain something, I'm receiving it or I'm getting that. I'm adding on to what I already have. And the loss of something means that it's being removed or taken away from me. So I like to think of numbers on a number line. So in here, I can draw myself a number line, and I know we're writing with the computer mouse, so it might look a little silly, and that's okay. So I'm going to start with 0 here, and we're trying to show the opposite of these. So I know that if I gained 2 yards, here's 1, 2, that I am getting 2 in the positive direction. And again, we're trying to find the opposite of that. So if I went the opposite, that means I would have to lose 2, which means I would have a negative 2. So for each of those, I'm going to do the same thing. So I know if I'm doing 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, to do the opposite, I would have to lose 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm thinking that a positive and a negative are going to be opposites of each other. So then down here, I can think the opposite of gaining 2 is going to be to lose 2. And if I'm losing 4, the opposite of that would be to gain 4. This one is losing 8, so the opposite of that is to gain 8. If I gain 13, the opposite of that is to lose 13. And if I lose 2, the opposite of that is to gain 2. So I'm hearing that those words to gain and to lose are opposites. And I know when I'm gaining, I'm going positive, and when I'm losing, I'm going negative. So those words are also opposites. So if you've not already done your turn and talk, if you're at home, you won't have maybe a neighbor to turn and talk to. You're welcome to talk to a parent or a sibling or call a friend and talk about this, or just record your own thoughts on your own. So you're just going to record several pairs that you know are opposites and explain how they are opposites. So go ahead and pause the video and do that. And then when you're ready to continue on with the lesson, just hit that play button. So in today's lesson, we're going to dig deeper with those positive and negative numbers. So it's important to remember that a positive number is going to be greater than 0, and a negative number is less than 0. So this is an important fact right here. Just like English has capitals at the beginning and periods at the end, mathematical language also has punctuation marks that we need to pay attention to. So positive numbers can have the plus sign, or it can just be by itself without it. Negative numbers always need that negative sign though. So when you have a negative number, you have to put that negative sign to identify it. A positive, we just know is positive even if it doesn't have that there. So you can see here's a nice chart showing us positive is always on the right, negatives are always on the left. So this football team had 3 football plays. So the first one they gained 4, so they moved forward 4, and then they lost 1 and moved back 1, and then they lost 4 and moved back 4. So one word you'll need to know to answer A for this is we need to talk about net. So when we use this word net, that's just a fancy word for the total here. So if we're talking about they gained 4, they lost 1, they lost 4, those are all working together to create a total. So in this situation, 0 is going to say that they didn't gain or lose anything. So we are looking for no net gain or loss. So if we have 0, that means they didn't move forward and they didn't move backward. So their total is 0. If they got the ball moved forward or backwards, 0. They did nothing is pretty much what that means. So our next question asks, what do negative numbers represent in this situation? So think about these negative numbers here. They lost 1 yard and they lost 4 yards here on negative, and see if you can find. So when we have negative numbers, what is that representing? That yards were gained, that nothing happened, or that yards were lost? Think about which represents negative numbers. C asks us to identify what the positive numbers mean, so the opposite of that. So when they were gaining 4 yards, that positive number, what does that represent? And you will drop that down there. You can always go and check yourself or pause this video if you need to catch up, or you can rewind to listen to a part again as well. So, and then D asks us to finish writing our labels in here that are missing, and then identify the results from the table and circle those. So our table up here, we're going to finish our chart and then add those there. So I can see here's 0, counting over 1, 2, 3, keeps cutting my 2's off, 4, and 5, and then going backwards, we've got -1, -2, -3. You can see on those negatives, we're always getting that negative sign, -4, -5. So then I need to mark that we gained 4. So here is gaining 4 and moving forward 4. And then we lost 1 and we lost 4. So I'm going to find losing 1 is negative. Losing 4 is -4. Hey, another turn and talk wants us to describe a pattern in the positive numbers you see as you are moving. Sorry. Okay. Crazy computer beeps. So we're going to look at this number line, and you're going to describe any patterns you see as you move in the positive direction. And then look and see if that same pattern applies in that negative direction. So go ahead and we're going to pause the video and look for patterns on the positive side and see if the same pattern happens on that negative side. Okay, so once you have come back, we are on task 2 here. And so 2 numbers, if we have been listening and following along, can be identified if they are on the same number line and they're the same distance from 0, but they're on different sides of 0. So for example, we talked about earlier in our Spark Your Learning that if you gained 2 yards and you were at +2, the opposite of that would be to lose 2 yards. They're both 1, 2 distances away, 1, 2 distances away from 0, but they're on opposite sides of the 0. So integers, which is what we've been talking about, all of these numbers we've used today are integers, whole numbers. So any whole number, 1, 2, 3, all of the counting numbers, and anything on its opposite. So no decimals, no fractions right now. So any counting number, all the way up to hundreds, thousands, continuing on, and their opposites are all considered integers. So if we're looking at this problem here, which integer is the opposite of -2? So think about that. The opposite of -2 is going to go 2 in the opposite direction of 0. So we're going to drag here, goes -1, -2, and now I need to go 2 in that same distance, opposite direction, 1, 2. So these are considered opposites, same distance, opposite sides of 0. So this asks us to drop these down and fill out this sentence. The opposite of -2 is 2 units to the blank. So looking back up here, you're going to answer, is it right or left of 0? So the opposite of -2, is it right or left of 0? And see if you can finish filling that out as well. Opposites are blank from 0, but on blank of 0. If you need help remembering that, you can come and check out our definition of opposites right up at the top. Okay, B says the integer 3 is 3 units from 0 on the number line. So if we're looking at 3, 1, 2, 3, so 3 units from 0, which we know is true. Which integer is also 3 units from 0 on the number line? So you're going to put that here. So we know +3 is 3 from 0. So another number that's 3 from 0, but in the opposite way, would be what? So the integer that is 3 units left of 0, so go backwards 3, so come up here and use your number line if you need to. So 3 units left of 0, and find out what that number is. Okay, C says that how many units from 0 is 0 on the number line? So thinking about that question, if you're at 0 here, how many places do you have to move to get to 0? Okay, it's not trying to trick you. Just think about it. If you're at 0, how many places are you going to move to get to 0? So using that information, think about the opposite of 0 is what? So is it anything? So is 12 the opposite of 0? Is -52 the opposite of 0? So anything. Is it just 0, or there's no possible answer? So I want you to think about that and try those out on the rest of C. Hey, D, this is the hardest problem we're going to do today, but I know that you can do it. So stay with me here and let's think about this. The opposite of the opposite. So we're going to find the opposite and then go back again and find the other opposite of 5. So let's think. The opposite of 5, if I'm at 5 on my number line, I need to go the opposite from 0, 5, makes it -5. Now the opposite of -5 is +5. So all we did was we found the opposite and then the opposite again, which gave us what we started with. So we would write that as negative. So we have these two here. This means opposite of -5. So the opposite of 5 is, drop that down. And then because this one is the opposite of the opposite. So the opposite of the opposite is what we just talked about. Go to the opposite, go backwards to the other opposite. The opposite of 5, drop that down, and the opposite of that number. So we're just going back and forth with those opposites there. Okay, our next task is number 3, and it says that Jessie is the student treasurer for the video game club. She records expenses as negative numbers. So anytime they're spending money, you're losing your money. So that's a negative number. And deposit. So anytime people are giving money, that is money you deposit into your account as a positive number. So she graphed these on our number line here. So we can see a -6 they spent on snacks, -$2 on pencils, and then the members paid $4. They have a -6, a -2, and $4 that they paid. So you can see here that Jessie did not label every tick mark on her number line. So we're going to think through and see, she just numbered the 8s. She numbered 0 and 8 and -8, and then graphed -6, -2, and 4. So the tick marks are all how far apart. So if we're going here, this first one shows me that it was counting by what? And then if I was over here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, all in the negatives. So this one dropping down is what is she counting by to label all of those tick marks. And then thinking here, if you were listening, I actually just told you the answer. So thinking about what would this tick mark here between -6 and 2. So if we're counting by what would be right here between those? And then it wants us to say, where would we put $5? So I know that it's bigger than 4 and smaller than 8. But earlier I figured out that I'm only putting even numbers on these tick marks. So if I had $1, I know this tick mark is 2, 4, 6, 8. If I had 1, I would put it right in between 0 and 2, which would be here. If I had 3, I would put it in between 2 and 4. So I want you to think, if you had $5, where on this number line would you put $5? Okay, then our turn and talk says that Jessie's number line has 0 in the middle. Do you think that you always have to have 0 on your number line? So I want you to think of maybe a situation where you would need 0 on your number line, and see if you can think of a situation where maybe 0 wouldn't need to be on your number line. See if you can think about that and tell me about those situations there. So go ahead and pause the video and do that, and come back when you're ready to move on. Okay, our last task for today is about temperatures in a city. So the morning temperature in a large city in Minnesota was recorded every day for 7 days, and you can see them here as follows. So we're going to take those and graph. So now one thing I noticed about this number line is that instead of going left to right, this number line is going up and down. So I can still see 0. I can see my positive numbers are going to go up. Here's 5, here's 10, and I can see in between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just every tick mark is counting by ones. And anytime I'm talking about a negative number, it needs to go down. So take these here and see if you can drop them in the correct place. So pause the video and do that. Okay, now B wants us to find the ones that are opposites, and it wants us to select all of those. So there's not just one right answer. So look through and see anytime you have an opposite. So for an example, if one day it was 5 degrees and another day it was -5, those would be opposites because they're the same distance from 0. So pause the video and look through and see which ones are opposites, and select any of them that you think are opposites. Okay, next, gave you some answers there. Okay, so next, this asks us to complete the sentence. Opposites are blank from 0, but on blank of 0. So the first one, they are the same distance or different distances. We're talking about opposites. And again, you can go back a page right here. And actually, you can go back 2 pages to task 2, and you have a definition right here of opposites if you need that to answer that question. So that's that one. Okay. C, the opposite of -7 is blank. So think about the opposite of -7 would be what? Because it is the same or different distances from 0, but on the same or opposite sides. So again, using that definition from right up above, think about the opposite of 7. And D, we again are selecting all of these that are true. So a point at 10 represents 10 below. So I notice here, this just says 10. So that means 10 positive. So if I'm coming back up to my chart, 10 positive is going to be above 0. So you need to read that first sentence and decide if that is true. A point at 10 represents 10 degrees above 0. So one of those is true, one of those is false. So 10 positive is going to be above 0. So then go ahead and finish D and select all that are true. And pause the video if you need to finish that, and then come back to do E. We're almost done for today. When a temperature is the opposite of another temperature, the two temperatures are blank from 0, but on blank of 0. So again, we're just using that definition of an opposite. So they are the same distance from 0, but they're on opposite sides of 0. Okay, and our last turn and talk is think about when in the real world do you see opposites, or have you used opposites or negative numbers? And tell me about a couple situations that you've actually had to use a negative number. And that is all of our lesson today. So now you're going to go back to Canvas when you have finished this, and there is a little task for you to complete, and then you'll need to do your check for understanding, and you are done for today. Way to go.